Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into a story that's both tragic and controversial.
Yeah, it's a story that people still argue about, even decades later.
That's right. The Waco siege
A 51-day standoff back in 1993
between federal agents.
and a religious group called the Branch Davidians.
It happened in Waco, Texas,
Yeah,
and ended in a devastating fire.
a fire that killed dozens of people, men, women, and children.
So many twists and turns to this story. We're going to do our best to break it all down.
You know, one of the most fascinating parts,
Okay.
maybe unsettling too, is how a simple question about directions
Directions.
might have tipped off the Branch Davidians about the raid.
Great by who?
The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm.
ATF.
Right, the ATF.
Whoa, okay, I'm definitely curious about that. But first,
Yeah.
who were the Branch Davidians? What did they believe?
Well, they were a religious group, a splinter group, actually.
Okay.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church. And they had their own unique interpretation of the Bible, especially the book of Revelation.
Okay.
They believed the apocalypse was coming, like right around the corner.
And this guy, David Koresh, he was their leader. Right?
Yeah. David Koresh, a charismatic leader.
What was his role in all this?
The Branch Davidians saw him as a prophet. Their whole belief system revolved around Koresh's teaching.
And their compound, Mount Carmel. Right?
Exactly, Mount Carmel. That became the center of everything. They lived communally there.
Now, the ATF,
Mm.
they'd been investigating the Branch Davidians, hadn't they?
That's right.
Why? What were they looking for?
They suspected the Davidians were stockpiling weapons at Mount Carmel. Illegal weapons.
So they got warrants, right?
They got warrants to search the compound
then
and then planned a raid.
to seize the weapon.
Exactly. But like you said earlier, something went wrong.
Yeah, you mentioned something about directions.
Right. There was this local news reporter. He'd heard about the raid, and he was trying to find the Davidian compound. So he stops to ask for directions.
Seems harmless enough.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But he asks this postal worker, and it turns out that postal worker was Koresh's brother-in-law.
Oh, wow. What are the chances? So this reporter, he accidentally tipped them off.
I mean, he didn't say anything directly about the raid, but asking about Mount Carmel, that was enough to raise suspicion.
Yeah, I can see that.
Word spread quickly, and by the time the ATF got there, the Branch Davidians, they were ready. They knew something was up.
And that's when things really took a turn, right?
Yeah, on February 28, 1993, the ATF tried to execute their raid.
But it didn't go as planned.
No, it turned into a shootout, a violent one, the element of surprise, completely gone.
And people died.
Yeah. 4 ATF agents were killed, and 6 Branch Davidians.
So the raid was a complete disaster. What happened after that? Did the ATF just retreat?
They had to. They withdrew, and the FBI took over. That was the beginning of the 51-day siege.
The siege that would captivate the nation.
And tragically end in flames.
Last we left off, the ATF raid had gone horribly wrong. A violent shootout. And now the FBI is in charge. The siege is just beginning.
A 51-day siege.
It's a powder keg ready to explode. So much tension. What happened next?
Well, the FBI tried a bunch of things. Negotiation, pressure tactics.
Like what?
They tried to appeal to Koresh, to his sense of responsibility.
So.
His followers, the children especially. They even offered him a chance to broadcast his message to a wider audience.
Thinking that might, what? Make him want to surrender?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it would satisfy his ego and lead to a breakthrough.
Did it work?
Koresh was a master manipulator. He'd string the negotiators along, make promises he wouldn't keep.
And
Then he'd turn on a dime, become angry, accusatory.
Sounds exhausting.
Oh, it was. And the media, he loved the media attention, played it up, presented himself as a martyr, fighting government oppression.
You mentioned earlier some of the FBI's tactics were controversial. What do you mean?
Well, the sleep deprivation, blaring music, sounds all night long. A lot of people criticized that.
Why?
Said it was psychologically damaging to the children especially. It just made things worse.
Made a peaceful ending less likely.
Exactly.
So why did the FBI do it? What was their reasoning?
Their argument was that they had to try everything to pressure Koresh, get him to surrender.
It was all about the hostages.
They believed Koresh was a threat to their safety.
So the FBI felt they had to act. But their method's over.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Morally, ethically, no easy answers.
Definitely added to the controversy.
Oh, absolutely. Fueled the fire, you could say.
And then, tragically, it escalated even further. After 51 days, the FBI launched a final assault.
They'd reached a breaking point. The frustration was mounting. They were convinced Koresh would never surrender. Not peacefully, anyway.
So they got approval.
From Attorney General Janet Reno.
What plan?
A plan to use tear gas to try to force the Branch Davidians out.
Out of Mount Carmel.
Right.
Why tear gas?
They hoped it would be non-lethal, a way to end the siege, without more bloodshed.
Make it impossible to stay inside.
Force them to come out.
So, April 19th, 1993, the FBI launched their assault. What happened?
Armored vehicles approached the compound, broke holes in the walls, pumped in tear gas.
How did the Branch Davidians respond?
They fired back, but not like before. Not as much resistance as during the ATF raid.
And then?
Then the fire started.
Inside Mount Carmel.
Yes, just a short time. After the tear gas, flames were spotted.
And it spread.
Quickly, engulfed the whole building. Within minutes.
Do we know how it started?
That's the big mystery, one of the biggest controversies. The government, they say the Branch Davidians did it intentionally.
A suicide pact.
Yeah, they say they have recordings from during the siege. Conversations that suggest a plan.
But is there proof?
The recordings are open to interpretation.
Meaning?
Some experts disagree with the government's conclusions and the survivors.
What do they say?
They deny it vehemently. They say it was an accident or that the FBI started it.
The FBI.
Some people blame those tear gas canisters, the pyrotechnic ones.
Why?
They get really hot. They can ignite things.
So the cause of the fire, it's still debated.
Very much so.
But the outcome?
Devastating.
76 people died.
25 of them children. David Koresh, too.
It's an image that's hard to forget. The burning compound, the loss of life.
Yeah.
Horrific.
It shocked the nation, the whole world.
Waco became this symbol of tragedy, of government overreach, extremism.
It sparked debates about religious freedom, the use of force.
So after the smoke cleared,
Investigations, trials, accusations, a grand jury to investigate the deaths of the ATF agents.
and the surviving Branch Davidians.
Some were indicted.
On what charges?
Various charges.
Oh, boy.
Firearms violations, aiding and abetting in the deaths of the ATF agents.
What happened in the trials?
They dragged on lots of legal back and forth, conflicting testimony.
And in the end?
Some were acquitted, some convicted, but only on lesser charges.
So no one was held accountable?
Not directly. Not for the fire itself.
So it remained a mystery?
A point of contention. And the trials, they didn't really bring closure.
Not for the families?
No.
What about the impact on America? On society as a whole?
Waco left a mark. A deep one. It fueled distrust of the government.
Certain groups were especially affected.
The ones who saw Waco as government tyranny, overreach.
And then there's the connection to the Oklahoma City bombing.
Timothy McVeigh.
The bomber.
He was deeply affected by Waco, saw it as government brutality.
And the date he chose.
April 19th.
1995.
His second anniversary of the fire.
It's a stark reminder that the impact of Waco reached far beyond that compound.
The scars run deep.
So we've covered a lot. The Branch Davidians, the raid, the standoff, the tactics, the fire. But what about the media?
The media played a big role.
How so?
The coverage was intense, sensationalized a lot of the time. It shaped public opinion, and it might have even influenced the actions of both sides.
Branch Davidians and the FBI. How?
Well, all the media attention. It gave Koresh a platform to spread his message. He looked like a defiant hero, standing up to the government.
So in a way, the media gave him more power, made him less likely to back down.
Possibly. But the flip side is the media also put pressure on the FBI to resolve the situation quickly.
Which maybe pushed them towards using force.
That's one argument.
It's complicated.
Very complicated. The media, the government, the people involved, it's all intertwined. And it raises questions about how we cover events like this.
The media's role.
The potential for bias.
Yeah.
The ethical considerations.
Because even with cameras there, reporters on the scene.
The truth can be hard to find. And the narrative. Easily manipulated.
We'll need to be careful.
Approach stories like this with a critical eye. Consider different perspectives.
And remember,
there are often more questions than answers.
So we've really dug deep into this story. The Branch Davidians, the ATF raid, the 51 days, the fire. So many what ifs. And it's still relevant today.
Yeah, it makes you think about individual freedom, government power, the role of faith, how we deal with groups that have different beliefs.
Beliefs that seem outside the mainstream.
Exactly. And there are no easy answers.
Nope. Waco was complicated. A lot of layers.
Mm-hmm.
And people are still talking about it, debating it.
What makes Waco so fascinating, so troubling, I guess, is all the unanswered questions.
Yeah, like what actually caused the fire?
That's the big one. The government says the Branch Davidians did it, set it themselves. But survivors and experts, they challenge that.
And those tear gas canisters?
The pyrotechnic ones, still a point of contention.
It's just tragic. We may never know for sure what happened in those final moments.
Yet all that uncertainty, it leads to speculation, conspiracy theories, mistrust.
We also talked about the media and how they covered the siege. Do you think they share some of the blame for what happened?
Well, they had a report on it. It was a big story. But they needed to be careful, accurate, balanced.
Not sensational.
Right. And some people say they focused too much on Koresh, made him seem larger than life.
So he was less willing to compromise.
Maybe. But on the other hand, all that attention put pressure on the FBI, too.
To end it quickly.
Yeah.
Even if it meant using force.
Yeah. So it's a two-way street. The media, the government, those involved, it all gets mixed up.
Looking back on Waco, what are the big takeaways? What did we learn?
I think Waco shows us how important communication is, especially in these situations where the stakes are high. The FBI and the Branch Davidians, they couldn't understand each other.
A communication breakdown.
A major factor in the tragedy.
So better communication. Might have changed things.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's worth thinking about. If they could have talked, really understood each other, maybe, just maybe, there could have been a peaceful ending.
Waco also makes us think about the use of force by law enforcement, especially when dealing with groups that have unusual beliefs.
The tear gas, that was a big decision, a controversial one. And then the fire. No matter how it started, it makes you question. Escalating things, using force, is ever the right answer.
It's a tough balance, isn't it? Public safety versus individual rights, and when you're dealing with people who are seen as different.
It's a really tough balance, and Waco shows us just how complex it is and how high the stakes can be.
Another thing we can learn from Waco is that we need to understand extremism, where it comes from, what causes it. The Branch Davidians, they were on the fringes, but their beliefs were real. They mattered to them.
And when those beliefs are met with fear, misunderstanding, a harsh response, it can escalate things, make violence more likely.
So we need to try to understand why people feel the way they do, even if we disagree with them.
Yeah.
So Waco is not just about a standoff, a tragedy. It's about how we deal with people who are different from us, about the dangers of extremism, the need for empathy, understanding, even when we're afraid.
It's a story that still speaks to us today in a world that's more and more divided.
It reminds us to protect freedom, to be tolerant, to find peaceful solutions, even when it's hard.
It reminds us that history matters, even the painful parts. We can learn from it.
This has been a tough topic, but an important one. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive into the Waco siege.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for being here. We hope this gave you a better understanding of this complex and tragic event, and maybe something to think about.